Who is my neighbor? And to make sure we do not miss it, the gospel writer says right up front, but wanting to justify himself. Now, you know what comes next, I'm thinking. It starts, a man went down to Jericho. 6 really famous words. And we know that story, and we call that the story of the right. And we are inclined to think of it as a story about being good to strangers on the roadside, which is a big enough ask on its own. And we call people who are willing to help strangers, and maybe even get out of their car to do it, are good Samaritans. But when we see this question, who is my neighbor, we understand why Jesus is telling this story, and it's not what we have been thinking all these years. Because if you don't already know, let me tell you about the Israelites and the Samaritans. The Hatfields and the McCoys got nothing on the Israelites and the Samaritans, and I just totally dated myself. If you don't know what that is, Google it. They had a long-standing mistrust, disrespect, even hatred. So the commandments don't, to love your neighbor as yourself, to not murder your neighbor, to treat your neighbor like this and treat your neighbor like that, only matters if your neighbor is another Israelite. And then Jesus tells this story. And the question is, well, can anything good come out of Samaria? But wanting to justify himself. That is where the heart of this story lies. And if you miss that, you will miss the whole point, and then you'll just be fussed every time you pass somebody on the freeway with a flat tire that you aren't a good Samaritan. Hold on to that, wanting to justify himself, looking for a loophole, because that's where the heart of the teaching is. A man went down to Jericho. Man went down to Jericho. We tune that out almost as soon as we listen to it because it's so familiar, we know what it's going to say. And Jesus says, a man went down to Jericho from Jerusalem, and he fell into the hands of robbers who stripped him, beat him, and went away and left him half dead, and you know how the rest of it goes. And the reason is because parables are powerful. This is a parable. And the thing about a parable is if you don't understand the socioeconomic context of it, you'll miss the punch. Because a parable is not pretty. A parable is not a greeting card. A parable is not a commonplace. A parable is a punch. Sometimes people equate it to a joke. And if you don't get the punch line, you miss the joke. And if you don't notice wanting to justify himself, you will miss the punch of the parable. Because when you realize that the point here is that the Samaritan is the one who stopped, then you'll know just how angry Jesus was ready to make people. Stripped and beaten, the traveler lays beside the road left for dead, Jesus tells. 3 men happen along at successive intervals. And, I never met Jesus in person. I'm not that old. But did you notice the first person is a priest, the second person is a Levite? That's who this guy is. First he said, one of those members at Fullerton First United Methodist Church probably was a Democrat. Went right by. And just because Jesus is an equal opportunity annoyer, he said, and then another one of those members from First United Methodist just drove right by. That was a Republican. But you know who stopped and helped him? Just in your mind, somebody you don't like. Just think about somebody that annoys the living daylights out of you and you hope you never have to talk to them again. That's who stopped. And that's the point. Otherwise, Jesus would just say, the gospel writer would just say, hey, Jesus told a story once. And he would have left the whole part out about the guy wanting to justify himself. And so he asks, who is my neighbor? And if you ask a question like that, there's a chance you'll get an answer you're not going to like. So the common moral of the story misses the point almost entirely. And boy, is this a good time for us to go back and look again at the whole point of it. Blessed are the eyes that see what you have seen, Jesus says. Blessed are the eyes that have been opened by grace, opened by love, that see people with all of their deep values and their struggles as humans just like you. Because all we really have is what we pay attention to. What are you seeing? What are you paying attention to? I hope it's your neighbor, because that's one of the things that matters most. That's one of the things that matters most. It all hangs on that. We love the people we love, and we can't bring ourselves to love the people we don't love, even if we want to, and I don't need to tell you this because you live in this dark soup of this all the time. In your family, in your home, in your workplace, in your community, in the country, in the world. And we have now, well, maybe not for the first time, we are polarized by our political opinions in a way that hasn't happened this badly in my lifetime. But if you look at history, it's pretty much the human norm. And people, most of the time, resort to violence over that. Physical violence or just verbal violence. So how do we siege our neighbor and say, my neighbor matters, my neighbor matters? And then we remember, but who is my neighbor? Your Samaritan is your neighbor. How do we choose to do the uncommon thing? How do we do the thing that doesn't come naturally? How do we do the thing that is healthy, good trouble? Well, for one thing, you build a spiritual life, and a spiritual life will give you a plumb line. What does the Lord require of you but to do justice, love, and walk humbly with your God? I don't go very deep in the news very often, but I read a fabulous thing this week, just fabulous. Charlie Kirk's wife spoke publicly about her faith and how it causes her, helps her forgive those who killed her husband. And since that is a pretty boiling kind of thing right now, she does a remarkable thing. It's a tall order, and God bless her if she can do that half the time. She's a better woman than I am. But here's what's really powerful. She said it right out loud. Right out loud in public. Right out loud where it would go everywhere. So not only does she set the tone for all of us, but she is offering herself as a public example. That's a big risk. To say, my faith tells me that I am going to forgive the people who destroyed my life, ruined my children's life, and I am going to do whatever it takes to live in love. I hope every one of us can accept her invitation and maybe even go further. Like Jesus says, to really see one another, to see all the people as neighbors, to be outraged and heartbroken every time children are killed in church, or someone is shot at or sent or bullied for who they are and what they say. To see that our neighbor matters, whoever they are. Our inability to see with Jesus' eyes holds us back from the spiritual freedom and the spiritual power that we are being offered, as surely as seatbelts hold us in our cars as we whiz down the road. So often, we don't even see ourselves, much less others, as worthy of God's love. The word from Jesus starts before the story. Pay attention. See. God sees you. God sees you when you're hurt. God sees you when you offer help. God sees you when you pass by on the other side, because we don't actually see the people who are our Samaritans. But here's what I know. It is not easy to be a Christian. It is not easy to be a Christian. You know, there's a reason I don't have any Christian bumper stickers on my car. I don't want people angry at Jesus for the way I drive. We have to learn to look. We have to be willing to see, and then we have to be willing to feel for someone for whom we don't naturally feel. Your neighbor matters, even if you want to believe that person, okay, all my neighbors matter except that one. And that's the point of the story. That's the point of the story. Your neighbor matters. No exceptions. And this too, I believe with all my heart, which is why I can stand up here every Sunday and say this to you. I can't do that alone. You can't do that alone. We cannot do that alone. We need each other. Somebody, I don't know, probably 50 years ago thought it was really cute to say, a Christian is Jesus with skin on. It's really not a bad image. It's really not a bad image. And we can only do that when we do it together, when we are willing to be supported and loved, teased a little bit, poked a little bit, grapple with each other about our faith without getting angry, committing to one another that we will in fact pray, we will in fact read the instruction manual. We get together to encourage each other. That's why I invite you here every single Sunday, because even if you don't think you need it today, you need it. It's not easy to listen to the story of the Good Samaritan, not if we're honest. But when we pray together and share and study and work, God shows us the path to do the things we don't know how to do, we can't see our way clear to, and the things we just plain don't want to. And how do I know? How do I know that God has already given this to you? Just look around. Just here, just now, in these few minutes, in this one small place, sitting next to you, sitting in front of you, sitting behind you, God has given you what you need to live into the challenge of this parable. And Lord knows there's no reason to wait. Certainly don't want to wait till you feel like it. So open your eyes and see all the people, all of God's people, because your neighbor matters. And if you hear Jesus sharing that with you, and if you ask Jesus, but Jesus, who is my neighbor? The biblical evidence, he's likely to tell you a story you're not going to enjoy. Now, my goal here is not to make you uncomfortable. That's not true. That's just not true. I actually want you to be uncomfortable. I want you to be a little bit uncomfortable, because complacency never made a good Christian. Jesus tells us the story for just that reason and makes us uncomfortable enough to ask, well, who is my neighbor that I haven't been paying attention to? And then we see God's children with new eyes. We come to that grace, we come to that growth day by day, baby steps, one little realization, one new behavior, letting go of one resentment at a time, noticing where we are spending time not living into our calling. And when we're not the best we can be, when we're not who we would like to be, which happens to all of us every single day, we have a God who says, look, here's my son. Look at him. Listen to him. He is trying to tell you that I love you no matter what. Stay on the path. Open your heart. You matter. Believe it. Your neighbor matters. See it. And we want to know what matters to each other. And if you want to know what matters to each other, come back next week and we'll talk about that.